So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and today, to sort of round off the recent round of battles that I've been doing, we're going to be returning to the Grey Havens. So this was a battle that was sent to me by Captain Gervais, and the Grey Havens is a map that I haven't shown in quite some time. It's obviously a map that I've shown several times in the past, but then it does bear repeating oftentimes because it is obviously a fantastic piece of work, a very large map as well. And yeah, it's going to be an interesting thing as well, because 32,000 frames, to be fair, is on the shorter end of the scale, at least as it comes to a siege of this size usually. So we may be seeing the action get underway very quickly, which I'm always a big fan of. So yeah, we'll see how this goes. And obviously when it comes to the Grey Havens as well, just based on geographical location, it will often end up being the final battle for who controls Middle-earth, as the elves have really nowhere left to go after this other than out into the open ocean, although over here you can see a giant cliff appears to be in the way. But that is of course just a glitch, and obviously just one last settlement to take before the forces of darkness overrun the good people of Middle-earth once and for all. Speaking of which, we shall start off with the attacking players first and foremost, with Pharaoh playing as Rhun. So Rhun, of course, are very good all-rounders, and in a siege situation like this, they can offer many things to the team that they are a part of. And I'm pleased to see that he's brought the Variag mercenaries, because quite often lately we've seen them forsaken in place of the Lothlorien. But the Narim, a little bit more focused on their damage in this situation, especially when they're on the attack, and obviously a 5v3 means in terms of individual quality, the defenders are definitely going to have an edge. So I feel as though just going for the tankier archer is definitely the way to go here. Variag mercenaries without the armour upgrade, but still a good choice nonetheless. Rim, obviously very heavy spearmen, well, heavy spearmen with regards to Rhun. Very, very reliable centre to the runic line, as I've said before. They don't do as much damage as the Rim or the Rim, and they are more expensive, but they are substantially tougher to kill off, and they will stand and fight for an awfully long time, which is a good thing in the heart of Rhun's army. As evil men, they do have a few weaknesses, especially if you pack their army with their lower end units, such as the Eastron Clansmen, with one level of armour upgrade here. Eastron Clansmen, though, it is worth saying, even though they are a very low tier unit overall, as far as low tier units go, they're pretty damn good. As far as militia swordsmen go, they're probably the best in the game because of the amount they have in the unit. The fact that you can upgrade them so easily as well is another point in their favour. There's some unupgraded units over here as well. Some Shadow Guard, so the runic shock infantry, of course. Rhun are not exactly lacking for AP in their regular line infantry, so it's not as if they have to use their shock infantry in order to get some AP in their army like some factions do. But the Shadow Guard obviously will still do much higher base damage, and they have a huge charge bonus as well. So if you do want to go for a little bit of an extra attacking edge to your infantry, they certainly won't hurt matters. The Rim, of course, AP as well, only much more focused around being your standard heavy infantry that will sit on the front line and fight for a long time with heavier armour. The shields as well will certainly help them against arrow fire, a very reliable front line for Rhun. If they're up against lightly armoured factions, though, it can be a bit of a waste to have that AP, because of course they do have lower base damage and lower melee defence to sort of as a trade-off for that. So it really depends on who you're fighting, whether they're going to be worth it or not. The Carmel's chosen, of course, a General's Bodyguard unit, very next to some of the other line infantry units, are obviously going to have far fewer numbers, but of course individually they're very powerful. They may not be quite the same showstoppers that other units of this type can be, but Rhun don't necessarily need that because their army is of such decent quality throughout anyway, and they're really just here to sit in and support the main line as it goes about its work. More AP in the shape of the crossbows, albeit at range. They're very vulnerable, especially when you don't have the armour upgrades such as Pharaoh has gone for here, but the stopping power of crossbows is still more than worth it 9 times out of 10. More Variag mercenaries, more Rim, and then at the back we have a couple of companies of Rim, which if you save them towards the end, phalanx units can be very, very effective indeed. They do have a slight shield value, but still arrows, especially early on in a settlement engagement like this, are going to make the Rim's life very hard if you commit them too early. And then finally the Dragon's Wrath crossbowmen, which are potentially devastating, but 9 times out of 10 you find it very difficult to get them into a good position to fire. We'll see if Pharaoh is able to do that on this occasion. The next army we should have a look at is going to be Jack Daniels, played by, well, Umbar, played by Jack Daniels. It's not as if the Jack Daniels faction, that'd be something to see. But we have some Balakith shield bearers, which much in the same way as the Rim over in Rhun's army, they are an AP line infantry unit, albeit they are probably not as good all-round a unit as the Rim are, because of course Umbar have got other options. They are very much focused on their ability to be sort of AP mace men. They're okay, the shield bearers. I think there are other units in Umbar which I like substantially more, but it's a nice option for them to have, and it's not as if they're a bad unit. Obviously they're just not as good all round as the Rim to my mind, But one thing that Umbar do have, of course, is the Alcarondas Legion, which they may not be AP like the Flagrim are, but the rest of their stats overall are significantly stronger. You don't spend an awful lot more to get the Alcarondas Legion either, but as line infantry units they will stay and fight on the front line for an awfully long time, and they do a decent amount of damage as well. They're fairly expensive as far as a unit that you're going to throw into a fairly grindy engagement goes, but it does mean that Umbar are very difficult to face when it comes to their infantry. We have an Umbar Trebuchet over here, which interestingly enough have got sort of like the old Numenorian Arnorian look going on. But the Trebuchet, of course, a very useful tool, very accurate in the current patch as well. Some Warlords, nice to see some cavalry on the attack, because if you can find gaps, especially in a settlement as big as the Grey Havens, a unit of Lance Knights like this can be devastating. So we'll see if the Warlords can be used to good effect. Some Balakith Axeguard. Personally, this is probably my favourite of the Balakith units. The marksmen are all well and good, but they're very functional in what they do. They're not exactly a showstopper. The Balakith Axeguard, however, as far as an axeman goes, they have a surprising amount of melee defense, which is often the main downfall of a shock infantry unit like this, outside of course, the fact they can be shot up by arrows. But in melee, units like this do tend to fall away quicker than the equivalent heavy swordsman because of low melee defense. This is not something the Axeguard have to deal with quite so much. They have a higher melee defense, I think, actually, than both the Westmark Marshals from Rohan and the Brotherhood of the Axe from Khan. And both of those two units, I think, are more expensive than the Balakith Axeguard as well, so that's something to consider. Corsair Blackguards, who throw a javelin into melee, a devastating javelin, actually, before entering the fray themselves. We have some Belagair Archers and some more Balakith Shield Bearers, so Belagair Archers, of course, good in a skirmish. Some hidden units over here, which I can only imagine are going to be Rangers and Crossbowmen, because obviously Umbar can definitely leverage quite a lot of strength there, and the rest of the army is small enough that there should be at least 1 or 2 units in there. And then finally the Naruna Iron Raw Guard, of course, very, very tough, heavy archer indeed, even more so than the Balakith Marksman. Spears in melee as well, but obviously very expensive for what they are. They're much more of a supporting unit for the rest of your archers. Then we have Richie, who's going to be playing as Numenor, so the dark version of Numenor as they begin their fall, I'm sure. As we have some Naruna Iron Sentinels, very high-end pikemen, some Royal Legion of Armenelos as well, which are of course a really strong heavy infantry unit, and the additional manpower that they have in the unit makes them so much better than equivalent units of this from other factions like Wardens of the White Tower, Carmel's Chosen. None of the other human line infantry units of this type can even hold a candle to the Royal Legion of Armenelos. Not even with regards to stats, really, it's just because they have more men in the unit. That is a huge difference maker with regards to their general power, and really only the Dwarven equivalent units are as good as them, because the Elves don't really have multiple HP line infantry units like this. Their sort of really high-end infantry units tend to be sort of two-handing their weapons, like the Gwythi Myrdain or the Palace Guard from Mirkwood, for example. They tend to be two-handers, and Alderaan Blade Masters as well. Really, it's a Dwarven and human preserve to have their bodyguard units sort of be more line infantry based, and Numenor have got arguably the best one in the game. Like, even the Dwarven ones, really the Guards of Khazad-Dum are the only ones I can think of off the top of my head that can easily beat the Armenelos Royal Legion, purely because they have an extra hit point. But yeah, keeping company with the Dwarves in that regard is not easy, but Numenor manage it. Some Nardukadar, Remena Nardukadar with their AP spears, very, very useful, of course, to help offset that spear malice. Remena Abarim, which are similar to the Alcarondas Legion, only they have lower melee defense, but higher melee attack. Other than that, they're very similar units, only with the Numenor variant being a little bit more focused around attack, which makes sense because Numenor, you're meant to be a little bit more aggressive with them just because of their army compositions, whereas Umbar can certainly afford to be more conservative and defensive. Remena Bawabarin, a couple of units of them, AB arrows, of course, very deadly, even if they have a very limited ammo supply. Similar story with the Seafarers. Seafarers, of course, are, for what they cost, are fantastic. They really are, in my opinion, the heart and soul of what Numenor are all about. If you use them well, Numenor can open up a lead on their opponent, which is very difficult to come back from. Belagair Archers, and then some footmen as well, just to push the siege towers up. Some nice, by Numenor's standards anyway, disposable spearmen. Then we have Cardolan, who are following their Numenorian masters. We have some Greenway Garrison spearmen, which are cheap militia spears, which just because of the numbers that they offer are going to be very useful in a situation like this. The Minhiriath spearmen are here as well, which ironically enough do actually have a bit of AP, so you could say that they're a similar sort of unit to the Citadel Guard of Gondor or the Remena Nardukadar of Numenor. Of course, the only problem with that is they are significantly lower tier, so their stats are lower. Also, as a Cardolan unit, sort of a lower end Cardolan unit, lower to mid tier, they are subject to Cardolan's morale shock issues as well. We have some Minhiriath spearmen back there as well, so just some spears ready to join their fellow men as they try to scale the walls of this elven stronghold. Minhiriath men-at-arms, and there's also some Tharbad warhammers in there as well. Fantastic AP values on them, of course. Minhiriath men-at-arms very much a bread and butter human infantry unit. They'll do their job on the front line well enough, but they don't sort of go the extra mile in the same way that the other line infantry units that we've seen today would. The Alcarondas Legion, the Remena Abarim, and also the Flagrim with their AP. The Minhiriath Men-at-Arms are far more basic, but they're also cheaper, so obviously bringing them means that you can afford to spend money elsewhere, including on units like the Dunedain Captains, who as far as the heavy swordsmen go, we haven't really seen any of their equivalents on the field today so far. We didn't see the Pharazim Swordmasters, nor the Harbingers of Castamere, which are interesting omissions. It's possible they're there and I just missed them, but interesting omissions if they're not from Umbar and Numenor. They're often quite popular choices, especially in sieges. Hearthguard of Amon-Sul. They have a very wide morale buffing effect, which is one of the main reasons why they're brought so often as Cardolan. Like, they're not going to do a lot of damage because obviously they're a smaller archer unit, but they are very tough to kill off, especially from range. Like, they've got big shield value as well as very thick armor and multiple HP. So yeah, their morale buff is going to stay in effect for quite some time unless you can get around the Cardolan army and engage them in melee and isolate them, because they can stay alive in melee as well decently enough because of how strong they are, but obviously their lower numbers do mean they're susceptible to being overwhelmed if you can manage to make it happen. Minotaur, Roban Gatekeepers and Minhiriath Sharpshooters here in force. Obviously this is the main strength of Cardolan really. Crossbows, especially crossbows that are very resistant to being shot from long range by enemy archers in the way that Cardolan's forces are, because of their heavier armour on these units. Very, very powerful, because then you can get your stopping power into range in the crossbows and then start doing damage. And of course the worst thing, especially about the Cardolan crossbows and the Erebor ones as well, I would say, is the fact that they are more than capable of looking after themselves in melee. The Minhiriath Sharpshooters, of course, being those mace men in melee, means that if you send just anything after them, the Sharpshooters will still come out on top, so you can stop them from firing, but you're not going to kill them off. So it's kind of a Pyrrhic victory in those terms. And of course the Minotaur, Roman Gatekeepers, quite rightly so to be fair for what they cost, are very capable of looking after themselves in melee as well. But I would say there's a very real case to be made, I think, for making the Minhiriath Sharpshooters melee abilities go over to the Minhiriath Archers, and instead have the Sharpshooters be the ones that are vulnerable in melee. At least I think that's the way around it probably should be, in order to make it a little bit more fair, because having like crossbows, in my opinion, unless they're very expensive like the Gatekeepers or the Blacklock Engineers, shouldn't be good in melee. Like it just shouldn't really be happening, just for game balance reasons more than anything. Greenway Garrison Spearmen as well. And then finally, final attacking army, we have Angmar, played by MP Beckamy, the faction that everyone loves to hate, Angmar. We have Blackwatch Legion over here, which are on Blackguard, some Guardians of Khazad-Dum, more Blackwatch Legion, so the pushing units are here. Guardians of Khazad-Dum and a lot of Angmar Halberds are here to support, as well as the upgraded, I think, which are on Pikemen. Indeed they are. Some Snaga Stalkers over here, more Angmar Halberdiers, as well as a Catapult. It's looking like there's no Witchers though, from what I can see. There are definitely going to be hidden units though, because there's that's certainly not the entirety of the Angmar armies. They probably have brought some decent range presence, to be fair, because all of their skirmishers can hide, even if they are very poor when it comes to their ranged abilities. But now let's move on to the defenders, and we shall start off with Dark Reaper Death. That is the edgiest name I think I've seen in a Reforged game. We have him playing as Mirkwood. We've got some Hiri Peng with the armor upgrade, so Mirkwood, of course, very good, a good mix, I think, especially now that they can upgrade their armor. They're a very good mix of having decent armor but very high melee defense, and of course their wide variety of archers is very difficult to overcome in a situation like this. Hiri Lung as well, so nice heavy swordsmen which are going to be able to butcher their way through most of the units that are coming at them. Umbar and Numenor, to be fair, in terms of quality, can go toe-to-toe with the Elves, but Rhun, Cardolan and Angmar may struggle with some of their lower-end units here against a faction like Mirkwood. Elder Council with some Javelins. We have some Greenwood Watchers, which are an interesting choice. They're the Assassins, which you don't often get to see. Thrown daggers and then very high melee defense in melee, but they're a very interesting sort of unit. I'm interested to see how they perform, because they're kind of hard to quantify, really, with what they actually offer. Woodland Realm Axemen, so a lot of these dual-wielding Axemen. They've got decent melee defense, but damage as well, obviously, being with those axes, but they're very vulnerable to arrow fire. If, of course, the defenders allow the red team to get a decent shot. Easier said than done. The Elven King's Palace Guard with the armor upgrade, obviously absolutely lethal infantry unit in melee. Elves of the Elven King with their Silverthorn arrows. We have some Wardens of Amon Lank with their really strong arrows as well, but also that two-handed axe in melee. Some Ents, some more Greenwood Watchers, or is that the same unit? No, it can't be, surely. Yeah, 2 units of Assassins, that's interesting. We've got some Hiri Peng, who are already firing, some upgraded Hiri Alth, some upgraded Hiri Ek, several units have upgraded here, actually, and some Elder Council as well. So Mirkwood definitely going to try and blob up on these 2 gates. Might be quite difficult for them though, because it does look as though they're going to have to deal with 3 factions coming in on sides. We have Captain Gervais, who sent me the battle replay, and he's going to be playing as Lothlorien. Even stronger archers, in my opinion, and actually even better armour as well, but slightly lower melee defense values across the board in comparison to Mirkwood. And of course, Lothlorien also lack the powerhouse unit of the Ents, and generally their cavalry is not as well rounded as Mirkwood either. We have some Kindred of Celeborn. We have some Lorinand warriors, AP, which is something the other Elven factions do lack. A 2-handed axe unit that you can mass up and not be sort of priced out of the market very easily. Lorinand archers, so very, very nice heavy Elven archer which can do work in melee as well. Some Karen Amroth rangers, and Elven rangers are going to be a real issue, I think, for the attacks as they move forward. And also the dwarves, so it's going to be humans trying to take over this settlement, trying to force the elves and dwarves off the continent, I suppose. Khazad-Dum though as well, I mean, that is... If one faction makes up for the arguable, you know, Mirkwood and Lothlorien can have decent armour, but when it comes to armour, Khazad-Dum are really the cream of the crop in the game. Kindred of Celeborn once again, so going into the red limit there. Some warriors of Khazad-Dum, some Khazad-Dum reclaimers. Orc hunters, I mean, Orc hunters are pretty good as far as archers go, to be fair. They're probably on par with some of the entry-level Elven archers they'll be fighting alongside, but that's really Khazad-Dum's only ranged offering. The rest of their strength is, of course, going to come with heavy infantry, like 1st Legion pikes here. There's also some 2nd Legion Axe Guard, who, of course, have the armour upgrade in this case. Where you're the defenders, you're going to have a little bit of extra money to play with, so you may as well get the most out of all your units. Warriors of Khazad-Dum with Sons of the Fallen and Dwarven Miners getting ready to accept the advance as well. It's interesting actually that Khazad-Dum appear to be the ones going up against an AP heavy faction in Rhun. You'd imagine that Mirkwood probably would have been better served going after them. But, you know, that's just me. Lorinand Swordmasters, don't want to poke holes in this defence before it's even truly begun. Elder Council, Spearman, some more warriors, some more swordmasters, and also some march wardens off the wood, and more Lorinand archers up on the walls. We have some mercenary crossbowmen and some warriors of Khazad-Dum just stationed over here just in case. And then finally, just very quickly having a look at the final stand, we have some Mithril Guard, Legion Bodyguards, all the higher end stuff I'd imagine, some Elder Council, Guards of Khazad-Dum, some Watchers of the Golden Wood, and some Lorinand Spearmen, as well as some Kaladhon's Guardians. So, I think, without further ado, let us begin. This is going to be an interesting one, because normally on the defence like this, you can often judge how well the defenders are going to do based on sort of the quality of the armies they can deploy. And there's certainly no issues with regards to the quality that Khazad-Dum, Lothlorien and Mirkwood can bring to the field. So it's going to be interesting. Like, I think actually the onus early on here is going to be on the attackers to try and smash through some of these outer defences as quickly as they possibly can. And I actually feel as though maybe there's a case for saying that the attackers over here, so Umbar and Rhun, should maybe not move in immediately, because Mirkwood over here appear to, at the very least, be tasked with holding both of these gates alone, and they do have the entirety of their army over here to do that, whereas Khazad-Dum and Lothlorien do have some stuff in the town centre. But what I would do first if I were coordinating the attack would be to have Numenor, Cardolan and Angmar move onto these 2 gates with everything pretty much, put Mirkwood under some real pressure. There's the classic glitch on the Grey Havens, where that one tower causes all the units to go up in the air, come back down and then onto the wall. And then eventually, of course, Lothlorien will send over some reinforcements, but at that moment, when they do that, you can then move forward with Umbar and Rhun, start putting pressure on everywhere. Because then it forces the defenders into moving, and if they commit to a defence too much or not enough, that can be the difference between victory and defeat. And as the attackers, you can always make the defenders do that. It's all about if you can do that effectively enough or not. Because if you try and just drip feed your manpower in to a situation like this, like, you're not going to do much damage to any of the defending armies for different reasons. Whether it's the heavy plate armour that Khazad-Dum are wearing, or whether it's the more focus on the melee defense and just the overall damage output of your units in the way that the elves tend to favour. Either way, it's not going to go well for you if you try and drip feed your manpower in as the attackers here. Like, Belagaya footmen are going to do very little up against units like Hiri Auth or Hiri Lung, or even the Hiri Hek. Like, the Spear Malice is applying to both units, of course, but the Belagaya footmen are a substantially lower quality unit. You can see here Belagaya archers are getting into place, and this is one thing the attackers can do. They should have the amount of archers necessary to just sort of slowly shred away at targets. I would still say that you need to put, like, concerted pressure with your infantry and not just try to skirmish from long distance like this. but it's definitely something that you can do at the same time as you're moving in with the bulk of your units. You can see actually here the Balakith shield bearers are thinking about moving in, but they're going to get themselves completely surrounded here. I think this is maybe a bit of a foolhardy move, this, from Jack Daniels. You can see, ooh, I mean, this is just death. Immediately they're out. I mean, they took a full volley from the Elder Council, a full volley from the Lothlorien archers, and then they got completely surrounded by Lothlorien swordmasters and Lothlorien spearmen. And they're going to be killed to the last man here. So Umbar already losing a full unit for basically nothing. And Balakith's shield bearers are not a half bad unit to have in this situation, especially over here on this side of the battlefield. They would be useful in melee against the dwarves. But I think lessons should be well and truly learned for Umbar there. Sending in one unit at a time is going to yield absolutely no results. One day we'll reach the promised land where no one does that, but today is not that day. Balagire footmen and Balagire archers just going out here, and again, like, this is the sort of area where if Mirkwood, to be fair, I haven't seen the Mirkwood player in action before. I've seen both Khazad-Dum and Lothlorien players in action before, but I don't know how new the Mirkwood player is. But if I were Mirkwood here, I would be very tempted to, as soon as this gate goes down, to counter-attack outside the gate and try and kill off some of these Balagire, because you're in very little danger of them actually doing much damage to you in melee. The Balagire archers are too close and don't have a good angle to shoot point blank. And as soon as the rest of the Umbar force, or Numenor forces move forward as they do now, like, it's still just more footmen, Greenway garrison spearmen. Like, the Mirkwood infantry is going to make mincemeat of these basic spears. These basic spears are only going to be useful so far as it pertains to just sort of being a meat shield in melee for some of the better units and just numbers, maybe mass pushing with shield wall. Meanwhile, Angmar being skirmished by a Text 2 Dames mercenary crossbowmen, so this obviously really Khazad-Dum's only scary mounted option, and even that is only really when there's nothing to skirmish against them. As Angmar move forward, there's some Goblin Band that have revealed themselves. Snaga archers need to move forward. Really all it takes is just one unit of even the most basic archers to get into a position to keep the mercenary crossmen at arm's length. They don't have a lot of range, to be fair. They can move around fairly quickly, but don't be fooled by the fact that they are wearing metal plates. They are very easy to kill with any sort of ranged unit, really. But don't be fooled by the size of their crossbows either. They pack a punch, and they will do a lot of damage if Angmar continues to allow them to do so. Because there's still no archers really anywhere near them, and you can see here the Guardians of Cardolan taking damage. Bit of damage being sustained by Angmar halberds as well, and obviously Angmar, very much a powerhouse of a faction. In a different way to how all the defenders are, but their infantry is definitely very, very decent, and you know, the attackers can't really afford to be bleeding manpower in the way that they currently are. Well, it's looking like over here, well, Seafarers of Nindamos, yeah, they're getting some decent value here, the Seafarers of Nindamos. They don't have a lot of, you know, and this is where maybe a little bit of inexperience is settling in for the Mirkwood player. Because obviously the last thing you want to be doing is feeding value into the attackers, because you don't have the manpower to burn when you're the defender like this, especially not with upgraded Hiriek, which can be so useful for holding the line for an extended period of time. And you can see here Balagire archers. They're also actually pointing the wrong way, interestingly enough, these spearmen. So even the Balagire archers shooting into the back of this unit, armor upgrade or no, will do devastating damage. So yeah, I mean, this is definitely the sort of mistake a newer player is bound to make, but it still baffles me when people do this, because I mean, it's not as if you have to divert your attention elsewhere on the battlefield. Like, it's very obvious what's happening and you're just sort of sat there letting it happen. Like, it's very rare that the other team is going to move exactly as you want while you make no moves whatsoever. Still, looks like they could lose an entire unit of those spears for no real gain either, so you know, it makes up for the fact that those Balakith shield bearers were so easily defeated earlier on in this fight. Lothlorien archers firing away up on this very small section of wall, doing some damage there to the Balagire archers. Like, obviously Balagire archers very much at home in a skirmish fight like this, but again, like, it's going to be difficult here for the attackers, because like, in order to get the most out of your skirmishes from a damage perspective, you need to get them into a good position. Now, it's, I suppose, a little victory in and of itself that they're sort of hitting some units that are unshielded, that they're forcing the defenders into using some of their ammunition. We shall see if this turns out to be a good thing. Meanwhile, over here, Rhun moving in over on this gate, so pivoting their attack a little bit. and instead trying to move over here. And it is going to be Lothlorien who are going to be holding on to this area over here. It was Khazad-Dum units actually, and indeed there is still one Khazad-Dum infantry unit, the warriors over here. Fortunately for them as well, it's going to be the Eastron clansmen who are going to be first through the siege towers, which Dwarven infantry and Elven infantry are going to have no issues whatsoever dealing with unupgraded Eastron clansmen. There's also the archer support they're going to be getting. Kindred of Celeborn are over there. There's some Lothlorien archers as well, and that's pretty much it. But it's a bit of a skeleton crew over here, and in terms of sheer numbers, Rhun has brought their entire army over here, so I mean, they're going to need some more reinforcements over here to deal with that. But I would also say with only one army over here, they don't need all of these units just hanging around doing nothing. So yeah, good to see that the Khazad-Dum player is going to shift some of those warriors back over to try and stop Rhun's advance, as Umbar also lumbers their way forward. You can see Umbar coming in now. Interestingly enough, Numenor. You can see Numenor moving in now. Interestingly enough, if I were Numenor, I'd be trying to take advantage of the fact that the Mirkwood player didn't really seem all that willing to move their units from my skirmishers. Even if you use all of your javelin ammunition just on 3 units or so, you can wipe out those 3 units for nothing, and then you can move in. Because, I mean, 3 whole units for the elves is a big portion of their army in terms of manpower, especially when it's like Hiriek, like the centre of their defence really, because obviously in Shield Wall you can add a bit of mass to an elven front line, which often does need it. Remen and Ardukadar climb the walls. This is more like it, I have to say. The Camping Panda and Richie coming forward in force, both Cardolan and Numenor, and also it does look as though Angmar are starting to do something here in the north, which will stretch the defenders, which is exactly what you want to do. Especially when they clearly have a huge quality advantage. The 3 factions that are on the defence today are all focused around having armies of good quality in different ways. So you need to try and pull them across the battlefield as much as you can to make their lines thin. Woodland Realm Axemen are going to be the first line of defence over here, but there's no range support really coming in for Angmar. And Goblin Band are not really going to be all that useful at dealing with some of these Mirkwood troops that are on the front line. Lothlorien warriors over here, but I mean this is again a big push from Angmar as well. So Angmar and Rhun, you can see here Rhun are really coming in, and this is the sort of thing that, you know, many players will not do. They just will not be willing to try and push in with tons and tons of units, and I will credit Pharaoh for doing this because he's going to take damage from doing this. There are archers here, there are March Warrens of the Wood, there are Kindred of Celeborn, and also Lothlorien archers, but there's really not an awful lot of infantry to stop this runic column from just moving through. And they could really establish themselves here, Rhun. Now, it could go the other way, of course. There are 2nd Legion Axguard coming in now, so there's reinforcements desperately scrambling their way over. They need to also establish themselves before the Keren Amroth Rangers get in. Because if the Keren Amroth Rangers set up here, for example, and shoot into that blob as it's still moving through the gate, that's going to be devastating for Rhun. They need to move in, spread out a little bit, and set up some front lines within the settlement so that they're not so bottled up and they can use their numbers. Even if Rhun ends up dying because of this, it will give his allies over on the other sections of the battlefield a chance to get through, because that is going to engender some panic in the defenders. They're going to need to send over reinforcements to stop Rhun. Kindred of Celeborn, meanwhile, shooting into the warlords, who weren't really able to do much of anything there. They were in and amongst the elves, but sort of they were stuck rather than charging. And there you can see the patented frame drops as the split shot comes in. It's one reason why I'm not too eager to go over and see what the Keren Amroth Rangers are doing, because that spells doom for my frames. But there is also more happening over here. Numenor and Cardolan were also coming in quickly, and again, I will say, the attackers have done what many attackers will not do, and they have committed in a big way early on in the game, and that will force the defenders into taking some drastic actions. I will say, however, that Numenor and Cardolan's units have not made too much in the way of progress just yet, and the Mirkwood archers are in a good position to support, but Numenor and Cardolan can keep this assault going for a decent amount of time. Cardolan capable of bringing quite a few numbers, and then Numenor can offset that with their quality. Just a single unit of Barrow Wights coming in through this gate to occupy some of the elves, but of course they're just here to occupy, not really do anything too special. Just like on the other side that Rhun are doing, Angmar are doing the same thing. They are just flooding in to position, and I think maybe the defenders were probably expecting the attackers to play this out in sort of a more standard way, where they take their time a little bit more, they filter in some of their lower quality units first. That's a luxury that has been denied the defenders this time, and I'll give the attackers a great amount of credit for doing that. because as a result they've managed to seize the initiative in this battle, and it's going to be very difficult, I think, for the defenders to actually recapture that, especially now that they're getting units up on the walls here. Snaga archers are going to be able to force the mercenary crossbowmen away. Blackwatch Legion in the vanguard, backed up by the Witch Realm pikemen, and there's really very little of this defence left now. I mean, Wardens of Amon Lank easily brushed aside. Let's see what's going on over here. I mean, March Wardens of the Wood are here, Lauren Armed Archers, Karen Amroth Rangers are firing in, and I mean, this is an issue now because Rhun, they were able to get some ways into the settlement, but now they have been stopped to an extent, and now the firing squad is free to tee off onto them. Poison arrows to try and deal damage to the morale, Kindred of Caliborn and Rangers to try and deal the quick damage that's necessary to kill enough of them off to the point where morale shocks will work. But the Dwarven reinforcements got over here in time. I don't want to zoom in too much because it will almost certainly crash with the projectiles that are being used. And yeah, I mean, this is going to cost Rhun fairly dearly, this, but it's working for Angmar over on the other side, and over time it should work over here as well. Certainly for Numenor and Cardolan, because the two of them together should be able to force away a portion of Mirkwood's army. You can see here, obviously, with the quality of the Romena units being backed up by the numbers of the Minhiriath. A good combination, and Mirkwood kind of floundering in the face of this pressure, which I would expect from a newer player, to be fair. Like, the pressure that Angmar, Cardolan and Numenor put Mirkwood under is exactly the sort of thing that was called for in this battle, and they've done it very well. And now, of course, Mirkwood are going to have to retreat to the relative safety of some of their allies. You can see that Khazad-Dum sort of preparing for that already. And over here, we can see that Captain Gervais is still holding on to the front line, so Umbar's still pressuring this front line, but it's more difficult for Umbar to break through over here because he's facing a more experienced player for one thing, and it's only his army over here, Umbar, whereas obviously Numenor and Cardolan can bounce off one another. Umbar are all on their own. There goes the Runic General, obviously Rhun. It was looking quite promising for a little while there, but the reinforcements were able to get over here in time. The Dwarven infantry was able to get in and stop Rhun's advance, and the Elven archers were able to get in position to just rip through the Runic infantry army, and that was, that is a quick demise of basically an entire army. So high risk, high reward, this sort of strategy, but overall I would say it was still worth it, because for one thing, all of this ammunition cannot be used later on in the battle now, and also over on the other side it was a barnstorming success with Angmar. Angmar have been able to secure this side of the settlement very, very nicely. Now, one of the main mistakes they could make would be to try and take the town centre on their own now, because there are still elite units in there. But Angmar can now move over to potentially help Numenor and Cardolan, who in turn can then help Umbar and make Rhun's sacrifice worth it, potentially. Interesting dynamics going on in this battle already, I would say. Let's see here. I mean, it certainly looks as though the blue team are sort of re-evaluating their position now because of that. Like, they've done very well against Rhun to sort of salvage that situation, but I think they can see that the situation is not developing in their favour, really. There's some 2nd Legion Axe Guard over here from Khazad-Dum, but they are very much isolated now. They'll obviously easily be able to defeat Minhiriath Spearmen, but they're going to get hit in the back by Seafarers. There's going to be reinforcements on the way in the Romena about him, so it's only a matter of time before this one unit of Dwarven infantry gets overwhelmed. But of course, also from the defending point of view, that's less javelins they have to deal with later on, so perhaps a blessing in disguise, but a good performance there from Numenor and Cardolan. Angmar doing the same, so the northern side of the settlement, it's been a really rough day at the office for Mirkwood, you would have to say. But having said that, Umbar, the Hammers of Gundabad, are going to try and retreat here. Umbar have taken more losses, like that much is very clear. There's some Dwarven miners over here who are probably just going to be a rear guard as well, because I don't think the defenders will mind losing a unit of miners all that much. They're already wavering though, because they're going to be taking point blank fire, or like, clear fire from the Belagair archers. So that's easy for them. And over here, some Balakath Axe Guard moving across as well. Yeah, I mean, Umbar have still got a decent army, to be fair, and they're also going to send over, actually that's the rest of the Numenor army. So Umbar haven't taken catastrophic losses, to be honest with you. More so than their allies in the north, but still nothing too much to be worried about there. So good for the attackers so far. The only attacker who has had a truly rough time of it was Rhun, but if Rhun hadn't committed in the way they did, their allies probably wouldn't have had the opportunities Certainly Umbar would have taken more losses because all the archers that came across to decimate Rhun were stationed over near Umbar, so Umbar would have taken these losses had Rhun not. And yeah, I mean, it's not a glamorous job when you have to do this on the attack, but someone often has to be the one to just put their neck on the line. And in this case it was Rhun. And it does also go to show the ferocity of Lothlorien skirmishers when they're at their very best. Like the Kindred of Celeborn, Cairn Amroth Rangers, March Warns of the Wood, Loren-armed Archers, they were all over here. The dwarven metal wall that was in front of them held, and those elven archers just did the business, well and truly. But interestingly enough, they are going to hold the streets here, which is good to see. Khazad-Dum and Lothlorien, maybe seeing the fact that Rhun have been destroyed, they have the potential here to hold on to these areas, and that's not a bad idea either, because this is the high ground, and to be honest, this might be a better place to try and bleed the attackers than retreating all the way to the town centre would be, because then you're bottled up, you've got nowhere else to go. There's still the matter of that trebuchet. Meanwhile, the warlords of Umbar are going to charge in, they are going to land that charge, but it is uphill, so they don't actually manage to get their lances down at all, really. They managed to kill off a couple of elven archers, but now those elves will pull out their blades in melee. The warlords are also shaken as a result of the fire from the Kindred of Celeborn. And there's still a few dwarven stragglers that are holding on for dear life. The Hammers of Gundabad, once again, going to be cracking through the, by dwarven standards, crude armour of the Arnorians they're fighting. Interestingly enough, though, that's a bit of friendly fire coming in from the split shots there. I don't think the Warlords of Umbar are all that much of a concern anymore. There's only 4 unit models left. The true danger of them has already been pretty well dealt with, to be honest with you. Balaketh Axgard are over here. Meanwhile, there is going to be an assault on the town centre, actually. Seeing perhaps that the defenders have sort of spread their forces out and they're not going to consolidate in the town centre, Angmar are going to come forward with everything they have once again. Now, this is risky, to be fair. The Watchers of the Golden Wood are here. The Silverthorn arrows are very damaging. They're going to be able to dish the damage. The Cairn Amroth Rangers, they may have used up all their ammunition already on Rhun, which would explain why Rhun have been so consummately defeated. But they're decent in melee, and they're going to come in here to try and stop the momentum that Angmar have, trying to push all the way to the town centre here. But this is risky from Angmar, to be honest with you, because I don't really see, like, when you're facing off against guards of Khazad-Dum and Mithril Guard, and Karas Galaton's Guardians backed up by javelins and Silverthorn arrows. That's a... I mean, you can already see that several of the first units that are in are already routing. Guardians of Cardolan and Angmar Halberdiers, like, this could be a catastrophic error here by MP Beckamy to move in at this moment in time. The Goblin Band are moving in, there's Butcher-Hound Pikemen, the Snaga Archers, but Angmar need support here. They need to try and push through, but they're not going to be able to push through. They're just not. Like, the Karas Galaton's Guardians are going to hold them at arm's length. The Mithril Guard and the Guards of Khazad-Dum are going to claim some Orc heads. And between the Javelin and Archer support they're getting, I do not fancy Angmar's chances here at all. They did very well early on to recognise Mirkwood's stretched out nature and just push through their lines. But I think they got a bit too big for their boots here, thinking they could do it a second time. But this time the defenders were much better prepared for it, much better. Cardolan are going to come across now, but I mean, when you're in a situation like that, a real meat grinder where units are starting to break all over the place, I don't think Cardolan's entry-level units are really what you need to have the impact that you would probably desire in this situation. Meanwhile, in comes some Corsair crossbowmen. There's bound to be some archers nearby, and indeed there are here. Peng. Corsair crossbowmen, of course, very much the glass cannons of Umbar's army. They are capable of dealing even more damage than a standard crossbowman. But they're also one of those crossbowmen that are very vulnerable to enemy arrow fire from afar, especially elven arrows that are very accurate and damaging. This is going to be very bad for these dirty-faced pirates with their harpoon launchers. These Hammers of Gundabad are still fighting. I mean, it does go to show that you can't afford to just send stragglers after a unit of surrounded dwarven infantry. You need to send something of quality to deal with the Hammers of Gundabad, and this is also where the Hammers of Gundabad's locked morale is going to come into play, because if it was just a unit of 2nd Legion, which overall are probably the more well-rounded unit, especially when you upgrade their armour, they probably would have routed by now, because obviously this is a hopeless situation. But the Hammers of Gundabad being locked morale, they're going to fight for longer, get more kills, and overall just hold the attackers up for longer. Like, you can see all of these Numenorians just sort of waiting for their moment. I'm really interested to see how Angmar are getting on over here, though. Like, Angmar, they are making ground, but it is costing them a lot. Like Angmar at this point, their army's on its knees. I think their best hope is to hope that Cardolan can come in and maybe take advantage of this, but Cardolan, they only have some of their basic units forward, which to me suggests they're probably going to rout, especially with poison arrows coming in from the March Wardens. Lothlorien archers, there's also the Silver Thorns being used, and even when they run out of ammunition, the Watchers of the Golden Wood are really strong in melee. They're probably Lothlorien's strongest infantry unit, as well as being an absolutely devastating archer. And as it is, this is looking dicey. I think Cardolan, they maybe needed to send forward some sort of morale buffing unit, whether that was like the Dunedain captains, or even just the Hearthguard of Amon Sul, putting them over here, because that would maybe force the elves to target them as well, which would take a while to kill, and it would buff the morale of nearby units, as well as allow Cardolan to maybe fire back into some of these elves. As it is, I mean, Cardolan, to be fair to Cardolan, he has done exactly what Angmar needed him to do to spare the Angmar players' blushes here, because Cardolan are keeping this push alive. But for how much longer, we shall see. I mean, Minhiriath men-at-arms and Greenway Garrison spearmen are not exactly what you need to deal with Mithril Guard and Guards of Khazad-Dum. Like you can see over here, look, their Mithril Guard are still completely fine. The Guards of Khazad-Dum as well, like very minimal losses, if any, have been sustained in that Angmar push, which goes to show that if you push into the dwarves and you're not like fully prepared to deal with them, they will make you bleed. And Khazad-Dum especially, because obviously they have even more of a focus on their infantry. Meanwhile, over here, they are trying to push up the hill now. So the high ground, sort of the advantages of the high ground are not being... they're not going to allow the defenders to utilise the high ground as freely as maybe as they would like. But Sons of the Fallen, backed up by Lothlorien Swordmasters, that is a very, very nice duo of a front line here. But Umbar are going to be heading up the hill. Balakith, Axguard and Belagar archers leading the way. The Trebuchet crew is also in here, so no Trebuchet anymore. Remena Bawabarim trying to get into position. There's a fight going on down here as well. And once again, it's Sons of the Fallen that are holding the line. They're going to get some Hiri Peng to back them up as well, who are more than capable of looking after themselves in melee. Orc Hunters of Khazad-Dum and Nia, Elder Council. That there was the defending catapult as well, getting some grazing hits on Numenor as they move forward, but it's letting Numenor know they can't just bank up over here and wait. They're going to have to try and find cover. There goes the Angmar General. The Mithril Guard and the Guards of Khazad-Dum, when you fight them together, as it's... Oh, the Witches are here. Well, to be fair, that is something that the attackers absolutely needed. I can't believe I missed them in the army selection phase, but they've actually done a good amount of damage there, but that's actually not as devastating as it could have been. I mean, they've actually missed the Guards of Khazad-Dum and the Mithril Guard to a large extent. Like, the Karos Galadhon's Guardians, Mithril Guard, and Guards of Khazad-Dum could, or should at the very least, all be dead by now. Instead, they've actually killed off mainly warriors of Khazad-Dum, by the looks of things. And they've actually dealt morale damage to their own men as well. I mean, the Witches are not going to last much longer here, because the Elven Arrows are already trying to go after them. In fact, I think the Witches may have been going after some of the ranged units anyway. They've hit the Elder Council there. I mean, to be fair, this does make the battle a little bit more interesting. That is an equaliser to a certain extent. I mean, Angmar still will probably be fairly disappointed with how this fight has gone, but at the very least they've turned it into a fighting chance for Cardolan. And we shall see if they can actually make something happen here. There's some Dunedain Rangers coming forward as well. The Cardolan tabards on them. Again, I'm not entirely sure whether they have a good angle to actually use their body-piercing arrows, though. We shall see. I'm really surprised that the Witches here are... I mean, they're continuing to grill quite a lot of these defenders, but they're still missing. Like, they have dealt damage to the Mithril Guard and Guards of Khazad-Dum, certainly. But they haven't devastated them to the extent that maybe they could have. The Witch is still taking damage, and this may be it. I mean, you can see here that I think the Watchers of the Golden Wood had used up their ammo. The Lothlorien archers had. It's only really the March Wardens of the Wood that still have ammunition, which is maybe why the Witches aren't dead yet, because if all of the Elven archers still had ammo, they would have been focused down very quickly, but it was just the one, and the Witches were able to get off their volleys, so... My. There's a fight in this yet. I was actually worried the defenders were going to run away with this, but no. And over here, Numenor taking control of the situation. They are taking damage from up on the cliffside, of course. The March Wardens of the Wood and the Kindred of Celeborn once again doing the damage, but at the very least, this front line is being overrun. The Remena units as well, with their good armour and their good shields, will not go down quite so easily. The Elder Council will do some decent damage, as will the Khazad-Dum Reclaimers because of the really high base damage that Axe Throwers have. This front line up here still fighting on. 2nd Legion Axe Guard now joining the fray to help the Sons of the Fallen and the Lothlorien Sword Masters. That's a very, very nice front line that Umbar are having to try and grind their way through. Again, very much easier said than done. What's going on back here? We have just the one runic soldier left, and he's going to go after the catapult crew all on his own, and it is a Dragon's Wrath crossbowman. And in melee, the discrepancy between one of these and a catapult crewman is huge. I'm not sure whether he can kill all 61 of them all on his own. If they blob up on him, maybe. Khazad-Dum Reclaimers are over here, but the Remena Bawabrim, who are now out of ammunition, pulling out their swords and their shields, going to stop them from firing. Which is just as important as trying to kill them, to be honest with you, at this point. Numenor are taking losses, though. Like, they are pushing forward, but they're taking heavy losses from the Elven Archers up on the hill. And unfortunately for them, it doesn't look like Umbar are going to be able to get through this thick front line anytime soon. Again, when the Elves and Dwarves combine the best of their units, it's a frightening prospect to try and push your way through them. Meanwhile, over here on this bridge, Midheliath Sharpshooters out of ammunition by the looks of things, moving forward, pulling out their maces. The AP will be useful. Whether they have the quality to actually impact on some of this Dwarven infantry, we shall see. The Legion Bodyguard are over here now. The Hiri Lung taking damage. They're in the open, and they are one of the more vulnerable units to arrow fire like this. Manatar Rummen Gatekeepers as well. These crossbow bolts. So, I mean, it was looking very grim, actually, for the attackers over here once upon a time, but between Angmar salvaging things with the Witches and Cardolan being able to keep this push, well, I say push, like, engagement going, because they have been pushed back. The attackers were all the way over there at one point. They've been pushed back down the bridge fairly substantially, but just the fact that they're keeping up the pressure is very key. Those bolts, meanwhile, savagely ripping through this unit over here. Hiri Lung. Don't know what they're doing over here, because now stray bolts are more likely to hit the Marchwarns of the Wood. Elves of the Elven King, out of ammunition by the looks of things, but they're still going to be very, very useful in melee. Lothlorien Archers, I'm not sure where the Watchers of the Golden Wood went. That's just Lothlorien Archers. Khazad-Dum Reclaimers are over here, Elven King's Palace Guard. I mean, it's possible the Watchers of the Golden Wood were committed to melee and then grilled by the Witchers, which would make a certain amount of sense why they didn't go after the Dwarven Infantry instead. I still would have been tempted to go after the Mithril Guarding Guards of Khazad-Dum. Like, they're so difficult to just wear your way through. Meanwhile, over here, this outer defensive position is starting to look a little bit more exposed now, but this front line is still showing no signs of succumbing to the Umbar pressure. Umbar are trying to push their way around this side of the line with their Corsair Blackguards, but that is the Umbar General actually in there. You can see him. As part of the Naruna Iru Royal Guard that have joined the front line. The Sentinels are also there. Now, with the Sentinels, that's a little bit different. Like, over time, they should be able to have an impact. And there is also the small matter that Numenor are starting to head around, and they should be able to surround that position over there. Kindred of Caliborn pulling out their blades, as have this unit of Kindred of Caliborn. So both units of Kindred are now fighting in melee. They're not as impressive as the Watchers of the Golden Wood in melee, in spite of the fact they can deal more damage at range. Like, the dual wielding doesn't work as well as a single two-handed weapon, statistically. But, I mean, they're still hard to kill, especially if they get supported. Maybe 6 Spearmen and 2 Axemen is maybe not what they were hoping for. Maybe they're hoping for more. Karen Amroth Rangers moving in. Elder Council, there's still some Hiri Lung as well. It will be interesting to see how long they continue to hold these outer sections for. They are going to be able to surround that unit of Kindred of Caliborn now, though. So once again, Numenor doing some good work for his team. Isolating and surrounding these pockets of resistance, trying to deal with them as quickly and efficiently as possible. Nardukadar going to move off from that engagement. Seafarers are going to move in now as well.
We've lost control of the castle.
I somehow highly doubt that. Remena Abarim going to move forward the line infantry. That should be more than sufficient to deal with these Marchwarns of the Wood as well, who are really just standing in the way to try and buy as much time for this front line up here to just continue to hold on, because I mean it's still doing a very good job. Orc Hunters of Khazad-Dum being committed to the front line just to try and shore it up as much as possible, try and make it get as many kills as possible before they are inevitably surrounded at the town centre on both sides again. But I've seen precious few people try and take advantage of the high ground that's available. on the Grey Havens, which really does surprise me. I mean, over on this side is one thing, but over on the other side as well, like that side is arguably even better because you have more cover to use as the defenders, as well as potentially getting like artillery into devastating positions. It just surprises me that no one's tried that before. I know that, you know, they could just ignore that and go straight to the town centre, but in a sense like this, where you have sort of one section of your army up on the high ground and the other guarding the town centre, I do feel as though that is a winning combination. In comes some Lothlorien Swordmasters, reforming with some archers. But we'll see. I mean, obviously the defenders could go on to lose this battle, and it could end up that, you know, splitting their army maybe wasn't a wise move. But I think they have made it work so far. Certainly the attackers are walking a thin line. Like, they can't afford to... Like, the Witchers have bailed them out, really. The Witchers have given the attackers a huge fighting chance. Cardolan over here, though, like, up on this side of things, like, they're starting to run lower on manpower, which is a worry for the attackers. What they need to happen is they need the other side to start getting attacked quickly. Otherwise, I kind of worry that Cardolan may not have the manpower or just the quality to keep this fight going. I mean, there's still Mithril Guard and Guards of Khazad-Dum fighting on the front line, backed up by some elves and just some warriors as well. There are Dunedain captains and Hearthguard coming to the front line now, as well as another wave of Minhiriath with Barrow Wights, so this is a little bit more like it now, like more quality units being sent forwards, which should be a difference maker. Marchwarns of the Woods still trying. They're trying to kill off the crossbows, but again, like shields, heavily armoured, it's difficult to kill off the crossbows as quickly as you would like that. Meanwhile, pretty much the entirety of Numenor's army that's left over here has been engaged by some archers and some Hirilang and some more Lothlorien archers as well. So I mean, Numenor is not being given an easy ride of it as they try to help Umbar break through that high ground front line. They're going to be bled all the way there. Balin falls. So that is a sign that Cardolan, you know, with their more quality focused units, are starting to have a little bit of an impact. But over here, I have to say, like, Umbar have been allowed to, well, Numenor and Umbar have been allowed to move forward. The Orc Hunters now, they are the rear guard. And all of those units that were fighting on the front line on the other side are now going to try and surround some of the Numenorian units. So perhaps seeing that Numenor, maybe, if they can kill off some of this quality that the attackers have, they won't be able to mount an effective assault from this side. Which I'm actually agreeing with. Like, I don't see an awful lot left from the attackers over here. Like, what do they have over here? Like, not much. Umbar has been bled very heavily from the, like, interior defences. They took some losses on the outer walls as well, so they've been taking, sort of consistently taking losses throughout. Numenor as well, like, they had a good time of it in the early game, but ever since they've been, like, with a smaller army as well of greater quality, they've been taking some punishment. And with Angmar and Rhun a thing of the past, and Cardolan having to basically go it alone over here with some Angmar support in the shape of the Barrow Wights, like, these sharpshooters are going to be absolutely vital. I think now the defenders are probably looking at the situation. I mean, if I were the defenders, I would think maybe, yeah, get these Khazad-Dum reclaimers over here and try and deal some crippling damage to Cardolan, perhaps. I mean, what else do they have over here as well? Like, they got the Tharvad Warhammers, they're a concern. Bit of a powerhouse unit to have late on. But, I mean, they're not going to be up to much if you can take away the support that's around them. And in come the Minhiriath. They are doing some damage here to some Lothlorien spearmen, but are Lothlorien spearmen really the best target for those bolts to be going after? I would probably strongly recommend going after the Khazad-Dum reclaimers. They're unshielded, like, the bolts are going to crack right through that armour. They're good in melee as well, so even if you can't kill them all before they use up all their ammo, they're strong in melee, so it's really a win-win-win, regardless of what you do. Meanwhile, over here, mercenary crossmen from the Dwarves of Khazad-Dum. Meanwhile, there's characteristic green smoke from the Witchers. Don't know where they've gone though. That might have been it for the Witchers, to be fair. Like, they'd already used up pretty much all their ammunition over on the other side anyway. Corsair Blackguards reloading, Corsair Crossmen. It is only a matter of time, I think, before this outer defence does fall, but I don't know what Numenor and Umbar are really going to have left to assault the town centre with. Not much is what I'm guessing. Still these mercenary crossmen running around as well. Hiri Lang. Like, defeat seems certain, except for over here for the defenders, where the Watchers of the Golden Wood are really making their presence felt. I mean, between the crossbows, the jabbies, at least the blackguards, more damage being done. Mercenary crossmen as well, though. Like I said, like, if you're not prepared, if you don't have anything to shoot them with, the mercenary crossmen, when they get into range, they are capable of dishing out an impressive amount of damage. And the fact that we're seeing some Numenorian forces start to break is evidence of that, I would say. Oh dear. That's bad. The Dwarven catapult has turned around, perhaps seeing the fact they're not going to be needing their ammunition over on the other side for some time. And that's bad for Cardolan, because morale is a problem for them. Tharbad Warhammer's coming in, so this, for me, is the camping panda deciding that he's going to throw everything forward and try and make something happen. It's admirable, but I'm not sure whether, you know, maybe it would have been a better idea to sort of wait until they are ready to attack from the other side. As it is, though, these Minhirdiath sharpshooters, again, much in the same way as the Reclaimers, they're good enough in melee that even if you can't kill them all off before, you know, they use up all their ammunition, it's still worth going after them because they're mace men in melee. Like, they're not a show-stopping line infantry unit by any means, but it's not as if your infantry is going to be able to kill them off for free like a unit of cheap, like Greenway Garrison archers, for example, who are useless in melee. Minhirdiath are very capable of pulling their weight. Tharbad Warhammers, I mean, this is a big push from Cardolan. Minhirdiath men-at-arms have managed to get all the way to the Khazad-Dum Reclaimers. They'll die for it, but... And also now. To be fair, though, there's not anything left on the front line from a defending point of view, so they're free to use their catapult, and they're getting tons of kills while doing it as well. So another good use of assets here by the defenders, I have to say. It all depends on whether they can keep killing Numenor and Umbar on this side, because if they get attacked from the other side now, even with a skeleton force, that could be the crippling blow for the defenders. Like, the defenders in these kind of battles are always one wrong move away from tipping the battle out of their favour to a point where they can't return from, especially late on, because of course there's so little wiggle room with the amount of manpower you have left. That goes for the attackers at this point as well, though. That decision to aggressively push forward from Cardolan was very bold indeed, but may have been the right idea, because I mean, there's not a lot of reinforcements over here. There's still 14 Guardians. There are still the 1st Legion Pikes, which could turn around, but they're not quite ready to do that yet with the fighting going on the other side. So I mean, there's Lothlorien Swordmasters. The Elven King's Palace Guard are a significant unit to come in, though. Mirkwood has been saving them until now, and Mirkwood's revenge, really, because early on, of all the defenders, they were given the roughest time. To be fair, they also had the hardest task. They were having to face 3 gates all on their own, whereas the other 2 were sharing the other 3 gates between them. And, you know, the push was well coordinated between them as well, so it was always going to be tough for Mirkwood, especially a newer player. But now, his Palace Guard could be the difference between putting this match out of the attacker's reach, certainly Cardolan's reach, because I mean, the Tharbad Warhammers are a very strong unit, but 1-to-1 against the Elven King's Palace Guard, supported by the catapult as they are, which is at this point consistently routing the Cardolan forces. They're also being backed up by Reclaimers, Swordmasters, who are somewhat depleted but still in fighting shape. Yeah, I don't think Cardolan are going to get through here, even with the Minotaur Roman Guardians trying to help them out, which means, of course, if the attackers are going to win, it will have to be from this side. Lorinand archers retreating. And the attackers will have something left, at the very least. They are going to win, but they are going to be on their last legs. Like, Numenor are going to have their Narun Aru Sentinels left. Umbar have got some Blackguards, and they've got some Corsair Crossmen, but that's basically it. That is not a lot. And they're still going to have to deal with the mercenary... Well, I say that, the Mercenary Crossmen just got a full volley from the Corsair Crossmen, and it just goes to show, like, that was pretty much one volley. If all it would have taken is 3 to 4 volleys from any skirmish unit, and that would have been the result, but the Mercenary Crossmen have been allowed to rack up, I'm sure, a pretty decent kill count for themselves throughout this game, and that may be something that the attackers look back on and rue. Because again, they've got some units, Kindred of Celeborn, 28 of them. The 1st Legion Pikes as an anchor, though, means that I'm not really seeing the hope for the attackers, because the hope for the attackers could have been no ranged units left, all the defenders, all we need to do is put our Nara Sentinels forward, and they'll slowly but surely be able to poke down all the defenders have left with their superior range. That's not going to happen with First Legion pikes around. Especially not fresh First Legion pikes, who are the stronger of the 2 pike units anyway, if only narrowly. They have a weaker shield value, but everything else I think is in favour of the Khazad-Dum pike unit. It's also the Karas Galadhon's Guardians, albeit heavily depleted. Following their lengthy fight on this bridge before being hit by witches. What a fight this has been, though. Axes being thrown in, Khazad-Dum reclaimers. There's a few units that are pushed in over here. I mean, the Elven King's Palace Guard have pushed forward a little bit too far for my liking. I mean, I can see why they've done it. They've tried to get into the Minotaur Roman gatekeepers and succeeded and stop them from firing, but risky moves. But I take it back. I like a risky move from a new player. A newer player, anyway. I assume that this is a newer player. I've never seen that name before. I'd remember one with such edge. Here are the Watchers of the Golden Wood as well, which were salvaged. 26 of them, so yeah, another unit that's very strong, as well as 28 Kindred of Caliborn. I think the quality of the defenders at this point is just going to be too much, and the attackers are going to run out of steam. A bloody battle it has been. But honestly, I think everyone can hold their head high in this battle, because there have been mistakes by most of the players on the field today, I would say. I think Khazad-Dum and Lothlorien, less of a mistake as such, but they did leave Mirkwood alone. The newer player was left alone to deal with the more challenging side of the settlement, which I think is probably a mistake, all things considered. Mirkwood, of course, they were dumpstered in the early game, but they came back with some important units salvaged in the late game to really put it out of the attackers' reach. As for the attackers, some good performances. We'll go into those on the results screen though, because there's still action to be had, even if it is the dying embers of this fight. Lorenan Swordmasters going after the Naru Royal Guard. As they continue to push forward, I mean, yeah, this is not going to be enough to take the town centre, and I'm sure they know it. First Legion pikes just waiting for the opportunity to poke them down in melee. Khazad-Dum reclaimers continuing to throw their axes. And now the arrival of the 2 higher tier Lothlorien units has now finally destroyed the Cardolan Resolve and the Minotaur Roman gatekeepers, broken and fighting to the death. One of the iconic units of Cardolan, but they're not going to be enough in this case to face them down, and that means, of course, all of these forces can now turn their attention to the other side. First Legion pikes are also over there. Elven King's Palace Guard going to pad their kill count a little bit by killing off units that are routing in place, but that's fine. Mirkwood has earned, I think, a higher kill count than he will probably end up showcasing in this battle. I think, certainly in comparison to his 2 allies, I imagine Lothlorien's kill count is monstrous because of how they dealt with Rhun, and then obviously sort of a standard performance for the rest of the battle as well on top of that. I would imagine that is the case. Well, Umbar has admitted defeat by the looks of things, which shame for Disparate. At least send your units in to have them be killed off alongside Numenor. Numenor are here. They're willing to send their last remaining unit of pikes in here to die, although they're not going to be given the benefit of the doubt here. They're instead going to be shot by mercenary crossbowmen. I think it's time that we went up to ×2 speed, to be honest with you. And here we go. I mean, Naru Sentinels, they are a unit which buff morale. They're a very good unit for both Umbar and Numenor. Obviously, they're not going to win here. I really like the look of them as well. And they are one of 2 pike units in the game to have a shield that they face forwards, which means they have a full shield value rather than a partial one for the ones that wear it on their backs. They and the Thranodine pikemen from Rudar are the only ones that have that. And in comparison to the Thranodine pikes as well, they even have really nice plate armor as well. So they're pretty much the only pike unit in the game that I would say are fully archer resistant. The Thranodine pikemen technically are as well, but they still have the issue that Rudar have with slightly lower armor values across the board. Even if the shield is more significant, it's still something to consider. And there we go. Lothlorien going to be able to kill off some of these units as well. In come the First Legion pikes, who are going to have no kills. They have not seen combat in this battle. Their armour and weapons are still pristine. which is surely some sort of mark of shame in a battle that has been this bloody. They may be able to get one kill as they push their way to the front, but I actually think not. The elves are probably going to finish them off before they get there. This one guy, this brave soul, is the only one left alive, and there he goes. So that's going to be it.
Victory is ours. Let it be a salve upon our wounds.
And a very impressive victory it was too. Very close as well. Within 5 to 6%, which is always a good sign, and obviously, you know, Lothlorien getting the most kills, Mirkwood getting the fewest, but I kind of predicted that would be the case, obviously, with Lothlorien dealing the damage to Rhun that they did, and then going on to have like a standard defending game after that. And obviously Khazad-Dum getting in between. They didn't get as many as Lothlorien, obviously, because they were more focused on being the front line, which, you know, ranged units are always going to tilt the kill count one way or the other, and obviously that's an area where Lothlorien have the advantage over anyone else in the game at the moment. Mirkwood are the closest to them, I'd say, but in this case, obviously, it was a different kind of game for Mirkwood, and the defenders, I think, all did well for the reasons that I outlined. Obviously, you know, kills for the Lothlorien and Khazad-Dum player doing very, very well. Very good interplay between the two of them as well. They're clanmates, so I suppose they were in voice chat with one another, whereas Mirkwood player probably had to do without that, which is probably why he was a little bit less in sync, but he still did well. Considering the fact that he was left to his own devices, I would say that that was the mistake that Lothlorien and Khazad-Dum made. One of them should have been the one to maybe help Mirkwood, and then the other one could have stood alone. It's all well and good to say that, though. It ended up working out probably better for them this way than it could have done that way, but even so, I mean, it would have been more balanced maybe if that had been the case. Mirkwood, obviously, you know, they probably should have set up their defences a little bit better early on, but as a newer player, you kind of expect there to be some gaps in the play. And to be fair, he recovered decently enough. Like, he did manage to salvage enough of his army that he was able to help his allies in a meaningful way. Like, we saw the Hiri Peng focusing down the Corsair crossbows. We saw the elite units like the Elders of the Elven King and the Palace Guard in the town centre helping out when things were getting a little bit dicey in the face of the Witchers and a Cardolan push. So yeah, I think the defenders did very well. They were good value for this victory, to be honest with you. But the attackers didn't do badly per se. Like, in spite of the fact that Rhun got monstered by Lothlorien, I still think Rhun did the right thing. Like, it was always going to be a case of, when you do that sort of thing, when you aggressively push like that, chances are one of the attacking armies at least is going to be on the receiving end of a lot of punishment, because the defenders will commit a lot of resources to them, and that will end up obviously doing a lot of damage, especially where Lothlorien are concerned with their hugely powerful archer line, as we saw here. And in this case it was Rhun, because Rhun were the ones to take the initiative first of all. They were pushing in first, and so it follows naturally that they would be the one to have defences committed over to their side first. So in the end, I don't think Rhun did anything wrong by doing that. Like, it's not a glamorous job, like I said, but someone, when you're being aggressive like this in the extreme, like the attackers were, someone has to do it. And Angmar did it on the other side, but of course you can't afford to send the same resources that were sent over to Rhun to both sides, and so Angmar actually profited greatly from that, because they were able to push through Mirkwood's sort of ever-breaking defence, and were able to sort of secure a lot of good ground within the settlement for their allies, so it's kind of a trade-off there. I'm sure that the Rhun player was kind of disheartened when he saw all the damage he was taking, but it was still a valuable service he performed. Angmar were able to push in and take advantage of that. It would have been, the biggest tragedy would have been if Rhun had died for nothing and the other attackers weren't being aggressive, but they were, and Angmar took advantage of that. But Angmar's mistake was probably doing that again before he had Cardolan support fully ready to back him up, and as a result he took grievous damage on the way to the town centre in a way reminiscent that Rhun did, getting through the outer gates. Cardolan did their best in the end. Like, it was going to be insurmountable to try and deal with the quality that was still in the town centre. Their crossbows did their best, their elite units did their best, and they held on, but ultimately it was always going to be hard for Cardolan to do that on their own on that side, and that was what they kind of had to try and do. Numenor, I think, probably did the best of all the attackers. He sort of led the way, and Cardolan supported him, getting through the outer defence against Mirkwood very nicely. And then he also did very well under rough circumstances getting through the high ground. It was just in the end he had nothing left to try and deal with the town centre, especially after Cardolan finally died. And Umbar as well, similar to Cardolan, like, they were on their own for the outer defence, which is why they took more damage. And in the end they were also the one that was being asked to go up against the front line on the high ground, which was a tough thing to get through. Even for an infantry faction as good as Umbar, to have to try and take on a joint elven-dwarven phalanx from the front is something which no one really does through sheer brute force alone. They tried their best, but in the end they just took too many losses doing it. So yeah, let's have a look at what the kills were for Lothlorien and Captain Gervais's unit. So obviously, as far as their archers go, that's going to be the main attraction here. Watchers of the Golden Wood getting just over 200. Kindred of Celeborn getting a little bit more, which you'd expect from the split shot, considering the blobs that were forming. Karas Galadhon's Guardians did very well for the time they were on the front line before the Witchers grilled them. A lot of their infantry getting over 100 kills as well. Lothlorien warriors doing quite well for themselves. Mixed fortunes there. And you can see here Elder Council doing quite well with their javelins. Lorinand archers all breaking 200 kills, so all of their archers, pretty much all of their more expensive archers, breaking 200. The Marchwarns of the Wood getting below 200, but the morale damage they did could have been just as significant as some of the kills that they got. But of course, the Keren Amroth Rangers getting a flat 1,000, which that's a nice square, nice round number to have on your Rangers for kills. Obviously, the Rangers pretty much the only kind of unit in the game which is capable of getting 1,000 kills in a real battle situation. Like, elite infantry could probably do it if they were facing nothing but fodder, but that's not going to happen in any sort of real battle situation, whereas Rangers can. And obviously, unfortunately for them, I'm sure that the lion's share of those kills were dealt at range to Rhun, before padding it a little bit when they pulled out their blades on the front line against Angmar and Cardolan. But yeah, obviously this is one of those battles where the Rangers steal the show with their casualties inflicted, but overall Lothlorien's skirmish line in general was just in full display here. It did a tremendous job at dealing with the enemies as they move through. But yeah, always good to see the Grey Havens, the last battle of the Grey Havens here, or at least, you know, thematically I suppose that would be what it would be in setting, as the elves and the dwarves try and deal with the humans, and they did. So establishing that dominance once again, I suppose. As for what's next, again, I'm not entirely sure. Like I said, I feel as though I desperately need to get some sort of variety into the channel somehow, without overly disrupting my current schedule, which is kind of difficult. But over the next couple of weeks, I do actually have a little bit more free time than I was thinking I would, which may allow me to put some of these like sort of loose ideas I have into effect. We shall see, because I kind of need to do that sooner rather than later, because sort of late spring, summer, it's going to be difficult for me to implement new things. I won't have to stop doing this by any means, but it'll be more difficult for me to implement new things in a similar way to how it was before Christmas, where I had lots of deadlines and such. That'll be sort of the next wave of that, as it were. So yeah, I'm going to need to sort of try and inject some variety now, or at least within the next month or so, I think, because I do think the channel needs it, because I do think I am stagnating a little bit, and that's not what I want. So yeah, regardless, there will of course be more Reforged on the way, because I do have a few battles that I need to work through my backlog. So yeah, maybe some Silmarillion as well. But I hope you enjoyed this, because I certainly did, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.